February 3rd, 2010, Phil Isenberg was appointed by Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger to serve on the Delta Stewardship Council and was selected to serve as the chair. For the next 4 years, Phil served with distinction as the full-time chair of the agency, led meetings throughout the state during the notice of preparation process as we began to develop the Delta Plan, oversaw all of the public meetings, workshops related to the development of the Delta Plan that took the first 3 years of more than the first 3 years of his term. No one could have guided us through the process in the excellent fashion that Phil did. The wealth of experience that he brought to this position was awe-inspiring. And since the conclusion of the 4-year term as chair, Phil has been actively engaged as the vice chair in the office at least twice a week. And over the last 6 years, I've had the privilege to interact with this man in every week, and many hours of every week. And you've seen us at the council meetings, but there has been multiple times that amount of interaction that's occurred. Today we're going to recognize Phil's service by hosting a reception to immediately follow this meeting. We have some snacks and refreshments. We want to encourage all of you to stick around for that. But before we adjourn the meeting, I wanted to provide my colleagues at the front table an opportunity to say anything about Phil. I'll give Phil opportunity to rebut any of your comments, and then I'll bring the meeting to a close. So, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks. And the reception is hosted and paid for by our chairman. So thank you, Randy, for doing that. So we'll be breaking into our big budget for cookies. In Phil's public life, he's done a lot of water work. 14 years as a legislator representing the Delta, always on the Water Policy Committee, and legislating a lot on wildlife habitat, including protecting and providing public access to sandhill crane, other wildlife habitat measures, passing legislation to authorize the Los Baños Grande Dam. Wasn't built, but I think Phil gets credit for authoring the last dam in California, and also water trading and water marketing legislation. So a wide scope of things over a long period of time. And he also negotiated and drove the process that settled a major dispute with Los Angeles Water and Power and the state and Mono Lake, leading to the saving of Mono Lake. And he co-wrote and went around and provided so much information and help in creating the Delta Protection Commission back in 1992. So all that experience as mayor of Sacramento and councilman, in addition to water interest and as a legislator, came to bear in writing that law that worked with local governments. The marine life protection work and chairing that was groundbreaking, or maybe water dividing, but important. And then later the Delta Vision Blue Ribbon panel that led eventually to the 2009 Delta Reform Act, which created the council. And then, as Randy indicated, the chairmanship of that. So that's a long history, and I've touched only on a few items that he's engaged in. Phil's process is pretty transparent. He reads everything, he asks questions, then he asks more questions, then he follows up, and then he analyzes options, and often he does that out loud to give people a way to engage and think about it. And then he goes beyond what a lot of us do, and he actually pursues solutions. And part of that, and you see it in the record on our website, is that he goes out and talks to the larger public and to stakeholders, and inconsistent with a history of being in politics, he uses facts all the time to try and figure out what the best public policy is for the whole state, for the entire state. Also, if you watch Phil's winsome personality, but occasionally a little prickly, you see that he doesn't romanticize much, and that certainly serves the public interest. So I'm not going to romanticize either and say that he'll be missed. I'll just say thank you.
I think there's no need to cover the ground that Patrick has covered, because he has that background as a legislator, and he has seen Phil up close, particularly in that role, but also he mentioned that Phil has been the mayor of Sacramento, and you probably don't want the mantle of Mr. Delta, because I don't know what that's going to mean to the various people that when they hear that, but certainly a person of an extraordinary skills, intellectual depth, and I do marvel, like Pat, how you think out loud, off the cuff, more often than not, better than anything I ever thought about. But I'm reading the darn text, and I can't figure out how far you got ahead of us, but you do, and it serves a great purpose in terms of our deliberations. In Washington, D.C., and New York, there's a phrase you see often, the power couple. Power couple. Well, we got a power couple in Sacramento. One of them is sitting right over here. Where's Marilyn? Marilyn and Phil Isenberg. Very formidable couple, let me tell you. Gifted, well-respected, and very involved in the community, the life here, politically and otherwise. And I suppose it's hard to analyze Phil, because he dazzles you with such, rhetorical skills, and you sit there and marvel about the way he's thinking through problems. And but beneath those rhetorical skills and that marvelous intellect, is a moral center of gravity and intellectual clarity that I have very seldom ever seen in my life. And that's what Phil represents, I think, to this particular organization, but also to the community, greater community of Sacramento, the Delta, Northern California, and as Pat alluded to, really the state of California. This is a real gem, and I hate to see him. I know he's going to reappear somewhere at some time in charge of something, because he's a gift to this state, believe me. And let me add my thank you.
Well, I haven't had the privilege of knowing and working with Phil as long as Pat and the judge have, and I'll keep my remarks short. If I had to sum up what my experience of working with Phil and observing him has been, is that 3 words come to mind, and that is tenacious. These words are tenacious, judicious, and fair. And I first met Phil when he was leading the Blue Ribbon Task Force, charged with coming up with a 50-year management plan and vision for the Delta, which was a remarkable process. It's one of the best, most transparent processes with stakeholders I've ever witnessed, and the rigor that he brought to that process was truly amazing. Everybody had their say, and it was just the sheer amount of information, let alone the fact that he actually read it all, and then wanted staff to turn those volumes of information into very clear, understandable graphics and text, and came up with a strategic vision that really was the precedent of creating the first ever Delta plan. So that's what I think of when I say tenacious. During those processes, he was always driving past the mythology toward the facts. So I agree completely with Pat that he really goes after those facts. So in terms of the word judicious, he has a tremendous energy for taking all those facts and analyzing them. It's almost as though he's able to embody the facts in some kind of prism, and he turns that prism round and round in his mind, and as Pat said, he talks out loud while he does that. And it's pretty amazing, because in that talking out loud, those of us who are less skilled at that kind of analytical depth have the privilege of learning from Phil. I've learned so much from him. And the other thing that happens in that judiciousness, as Pat said, he reaches out to people, he talks to people, he thinks, he emails, he meets with you, he lunches with you, and what I observe in that curiosity and those meetings and those gatherings and the sharing of ideas and the debates is that one effect is shuttle diplomacy. So whether he is talking to you one-on-one about, what did you think of what so-and-so said at thus and such meeting, or he's talking to a group of us, there's a little bit of shuttle diplomacy going on, and the day that dawned on me, I thought, that's pretty clever. He's teaching us about other people's viewpoints. It was just a real privilege to watch. And the word fair, I think that Judge put it quite well, that moral center of gravity, and he's so careful in his decision making. There is I don't know how to describe it. He questions himself first, or at least you seem to. I don't know that you actually. That's the only way I know how to put it. But when I first started on the council, Phil sent me an email of, I won't go into any detail, but on the particular topic, and I emailed back, and he emailed a few more documents, asked me, was I sure, and I read the documents, and I thought, well, yeah, I'm pretty sure, and so I emailed back, and Phil emails back, well, here are 5 more documents. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is what it's going to be like to be on the council. But in the end, it was, again, a learning process, and it was such a terrific way to see he is very fair. And now that I've learned that he also was behind Los Baños Grandes analysis and the Marine Life Protection Act, that's, I think, a reflection of his worldview and why he is so fair. So I too want to say thank you, Phil.
Phil, I haven't known Phil very long, just through my service on the council, but I've learned so much from him just over this past year and a half. Just I don't want to repeat too much of what everyone has said, but just his thought process is really brilliant. And I've had an opportunity to just do some research on Phil, and actually when I first came on the council, and then again when I learned this was his last day, and he's done so much in his lifetime, and just as a public servant, I understand what that is, to really be able to give your life and your wife, and it's really a team approach, but just to be able to give so much to the public in the state of California. We're really blessed to have you. And I think of, Phil, you remind me of a former boss that's now passed away that I had years ago. But he told me that in order to be effective in service, especially in public service, is that you have to have 2 gloves, 1 silk, and 1 sandpaper. And I know that Phil effectively deploys the silk and the sandpaper in everything that he does. And at the end of the day, maybe rough at first, but he smooths everything out, and we get to where we need to go. So I really admire him, and I just thought about 2 words that really coalesce what I think about Phil, and it's really influence and impact. And we've been able to really see the influence of his work, his legacy, and all of the items that he's championed and pioneered. And I mean, it's really endless, and I would only hope to have as much impact in my lifetime that Phil has had. And in terms of impact, just to really truly be a person that is a visionary, that can really see what should be done and how to get there. And that's really rare, to be able to have all of those skill sets that Phil has in one. So I just want to thank you for your service to the state of California, and also just being a great example of a public servant, because even though he served in the legislature and also, of course, as a mayor of Sacramento, in these days and times, people don't have as much of a high regard for politicians. And I would definitely say that Phil is a great example of what a politician should be, and hopefully we can get back to that, just when I think about the presidential landscape that we are enduring right now, but not to be political, but he's definitely, but you're definitely a policymaker and just a game changer, so I'm honored to have known you, and I know that you'll be around, so I look forward to seeing you. Thank you.
So Phil, before I adjourn this meeting, do you have anything you would like to say?
I have prepared comments that'll last 2 hours and 35 minutes. I hope you don't mind.
Proceed.
Randy didn't complete the story. When Governor Schwarzenegger appointed 4 of us to the council, including Randy and myself, we were wandering in around Susan Kennedy's office. She was the chief of staff to the governor, and a formidable woman. So I've got the governor's support, not without reservations, to be chair, because it's elected by the members, not appointed by the governor. And Susan turns to Randy and says,
well, she had identified an area that each of the other 3 were responsible for. She said, Randy, we're expecting you to represent agriculture and to keep Phil Isenberg in line.
Direct quote. And he's done it marvelously. I will miss many things, and in all the career shifts I've gone through, I miss the people I've worked with more than the place where I'd worked. Although I've spent a long time in this room on a variety of issues. I will miss my colleagues, the DSC staff, which is just terrific, and the scientists, which are strange and odd and unusual and bright and interesting and valuable. But I thought, Randy, I'd do a couple of things. There are some things that only the Delta Stewardship Council has a duty to do, and I think you have an interest in doing. The rest of the water world is largely indifferent to the co-equal goals. They are words in a statute, and there's one thing elected officials learn: you can pass a law, but it doesn't change human behavior. Laws have to be pursued and supported and supported with regularity. And so whatever else happens, when the legislature put this package together and Governor Schwarzenegger signed it, establishing co-equal goals, for whatever you say about the grammar of the phrase co-equal, was a culmination of a 40-year battle, I thought, a culmination anyway, to convince people that no, the human use of water is not the only thing that counts. The environment, our natural resources count too. And to pair them up in statute as the policy of the state of California, that the Delta ecosystem and water reliability are co-equal, is a pretty big deal. And only the council is in a position really to ensure that what that means. And of course, in practical matter, it means that we're protecting, restoring, improving the Delta ecosystem, the statutory mandate, is actually achieved, not simply chatted about, promised at a distant future, and so on. And it just seems to me that that's the first and most important thing that the council has. The second is something the legislature and the governor actually thought up on their own, and it's the water code section that says the policy of the state of California is to reduce reliance on the Delta in meeting California's future water supply needs through a statewide strategy of investing in improving regional supplies, conservation, and water use efficiency. And I can't think of another legislative enactment that I've ever thought was as clear in predicting the inevitability of anything than this statute. You can build tunnels, you cannot build tunnels. The decreased reliance on the Delta is going to happen. You can't have a growing population, a finite supply of water, as Tom Zuckerman reminded us, and you can't have that happen without all of us becoming more prudent in the use of the water. Now, everybody knows that, and privately everyone says, oh, yeah. But publicly, everyone's just caging for the best possible deal in the hopes that somebody else has to take a cut where they can perpetuate a favorable status quo. So it just seems to me that only the council is in a position to push hard on reduced reliance, a statutory policy of the state of California, not something just referring to the Stewardship Council. And the third thing that we do that I don't think anybody else does, we have a policy to elevate the importance and the role of science in the management of water supplies and the Delta ecosystem. And by and large, most public agencies think scientists are really important and a nuisance. Now, I admit they can at times be vexing, but the fact is that they offer a perspective that we've got to have, and what we're engaged in is a decades-long struggle of moving decision-making on water and the environment out of the political arena to some other place where the pressures are not as great. And it just seems to me that if we keep that in mind, the best available science, the adaptive management, whatever it means according to Cliff Daum and all the other scientists around, we've got a resource in the science program and we have a resource in the Delta Independent Science Board, and it is the notion of independent scientific views, not dictated by political preferences. And the last thing is, what we're really trying to do is make this nutty governance structure we've got on water, including us, but not just us, somewhat more coherent. And there isn't anybody else around who's going to be able to demand coherence. So it just seems to me that you're going to have a lot of fun. And as you noted, Frank, Marilyn's here, partially to be sure I actually quit, which I promised to do by the end of this month, and partially to join in the brief and hopefully pain-free reception to follow. And this is the least amount I could control, or my bald-headed friend over here, from doing on this departure. It has been an honor and pleasure to serve with you. I think you do a great job. I think the staff does a terrific job, and scientists have their own place, and the public benefits from it. And thank you for letting me serve. So.
So, Phil, I'm upholding my promise not to provide any plaques or gifts, but I do want to adjourn the meeting. No, not in your memory, but in honor and appreciation for a lifetime of service and for 6 dedicated years of leadership and service to the Delta Stewardship Council. We adjourn today's meeting in honor of my friend, my colleague, my mentor, Phil Isenberg.
Thank you.
Meeting adjourned.